Good morning and welcome to day 27 of Bible in a Year as we explore through the Bible in 365 days from Genesis to Revelation. We are following together the adventure timeline created by Jeff Cavins, and we are going to be reading through the New International Version. My name is Pastor Jay Lutz. And we are going into a new period. Woohoo! We're going into Egypt and Exodus. Before we were going through the patriarchs, where we spoke about from the time of Abraham all the way to the end of the life of Joseph and his father Israel. And then so this time though we're reading Egypt and Exodus, where we talk about Moses crossing the Red Sea to Mount Sinai. We're going to talk about the Ten Commandments and the tent and tabernacle of worship. And then we're also, at the same time, going to be going through Leviticus and Psalms. Leviticus being the rules of worshiping God as a chosen people of God. And some of these rules don't always make the most sense, but that's because God is showing how he is separating the Israelites from the world and how they are to be the salvation for the world. They were supposed to be the example for the rest of the world, so the rest of the world knows what it is to live a godly life. All right, so this time around we're reading Exodus chapter 1 to chapter 2. The Israelites become oppressed after Israel's immediate descendants. Remember, we talk about Israel and Joseph. Those immediate descendants die off and they are eventually put into slavery. And in chapter 2, we hear about the birth of this future leader. In Leviticus, we're going to be reading all of chapter 1, where God speaks to Moses from the tent of meeting and gives him instructions for his people. And lastly, we'll be reading Psalm 44, which is a psalm from the sons of Korah. Korah supposedly was one of the choir directors. He writes a lot of the psalms. And so we're going to hear about his psalm about the deliverance of God's people and their persecution at the hand of their enemies and his plea for help. All right, let's get started. Exodus chapter 1. These are the names of the sons of Israel who went to Egypt with Jacob, each with his family: Reuben, Simeon, Levi, and Judah, Issachar, Zebulun, and Benjamin, Dan and Naphtali, Gad and Asher. The descendants of Jacob numbered 70 in all. Joseph was already in Egypt. Now Joseph and all his brothers and all that generation died. But the Israelites were fruitful and multiplied greatly and became exceedingly numerous, so that the land was filled with them. Then a new king, who did not know about Joseph, came to power in Egypt. Look, he said to his people, the Israelites have become much too numerous for us. Come, we must deal shrewdly with them, or they will become even more numerous. And if war breaks out, we'll join our army, fight against us, and leave the country. So they put slave masters over them to oppress them with forced labor, and they built Pithom and Ramses as store cities for Pharaoh. But the more they were oppressed, the more they multiplied and spread. So the Egyptians came to dread the Israelites and worked them ruthlessly. They made their lives bitter with hard labor, in brick and mortar and with all kinds of work in the fields. In all their hard labor, the Egyptians used them ruthlessly. The king of Egypt said to the Hebrew midwives, whose names were Shiphrah and Puah, and when you help the Hebrew women in childbirth and observe them on the delivering stool, if it is a boy, kill him. But if it is a girl, let her live. The midwives, however, feared God and did not do what the king of Egypt had told them to do. They let the boys live. Then the king of Egypt summoned the midwives and asked them, why have you done this? Why have you let the boys live? The midwives answered Pharaoh, Hebrew women are not like Egyptian women. They are vigorous and give birth before the midwife arrives. So God was kind to the midwives, and the people increased and became even more numerous. And because the midwives feared God, he gave them families of their own. Then Pharaoh said to gave this order to all his people: every boy that is born you must throw into the Nile, but let every girl live. Chapter 2. Now a man of the house of Levi married a Levite woman, and she became pregnant and gave birth to a son. When she saw that he was fine, she hid him for 3 months. But when he could hide no longer, she got a papyrus basket for him and coated it with tar and pitch. And she placed the child in it and put it among the reeds along the bank of the Nile. His sister stood at a distance to see what would happen to him. Then Pharaoh's daughter went down to the Nile to bathe, and her attendants were walking along the riverbank. She saw the basket amongst the reeds and sent her slave girl to get it. She opened it and saw in it a baby. He was crying, and she felt sorry for him. "This is one of the Hebrew babies," she said. Then his sister asked Pharaoh's daughter, "Shall I go and get one of the Hebrew women to nurse the baby for you?" "Yes, go," she answered. And the girl went and got the baby's mother. Pharaoh's daughter said to her, "Take this baby and nurse him for me, and I will pay you." So the woman took the baby and nursed him. When the child grew older, she took him to Pharaoh's daughter, and he became her son. She named him Moses, saying, "I drew him out of the water." One day, after Moses had grown up, he went out to where his own people were, and he watched them at their hard labor. He saw an Egyptian beating a Hebrew, one of his own people, glancing this way and that, and seeing no one, he killed the Egyptian and hid him in the sand. The next day he went out and saw 2 Hebrews fighting. He asked the one in the wrong, "Why are you hitting your fellow Hebrew?" The man said, "Who made you ruler and judge over us? Are you thinking of killing me as you killed the Egyptian?" Then Moses was afraid and thought, "What I did must have become known." When Pharaoh heard of this, he tried to kill Moses, but Moses fled from Pharaoh and went to live in Midian, where he sat down by a well. Now a priest of Midian had 7 daughters, and they came to draw water and fill the trough to water their father's flock. Some shepherds came along and drove them away, but Moses got up and came to the rescue and watered their flock. When the girls returned to Reuel, their father, he asked them, "Why have you returned so early today?" They answered, "An Egyptian rescued us from the shepherds. He even drew water for us and watered the flock." "And where is he?" He asked his daughters. "Why did you leave him? Invite him to have something to eat." Moses agreed to stay with the man, who gave his daughter Zipporah to Moses in marriage. Zipporah gave birth to a son, and Moses named him Gershom, saying, "I have become an alien in a foreign land." During that long period, the king of Egypt died. The Israelites groaned in their slavery and cried out, and their cries for help because of their slavery went up to God. God heard their groaning. He remembered his covenant with Abraham, with Isaac, and with Jacob. So God looked on the Israelites and was concerned about them. That's our first reading. Our next reading comes from Leviticus chapter 1. Chapter 1. The Lord called Moses and spoke to him from the tent of meeting. He said, speaking to the Israelites, "Say to them, when any of you bring an offering to the Lord, bring as your offering an animal from either the herd or the flock. If the offering is a burnt offering from the herd, he is to offer a male without defect. He must present it at the entrance to the tent of meeting, so that it will be acceptable to the Lord. He is to lay his hand on the head of the burnt offering, and it will be accepted on his behalf to make atonement for him. He is to slaughter the young bull before the Lord, And then Aaron's son, the priests, shall bring the blood and sprinkle it against the altar on all sides at the entrance to the tent of meeting. He is to skin the burnt offering and cut it into pieces. The sons of Aaron and priests are to put fire on the altar and arrange wood on the fire. Then Aaron's son, the priests, shall arrange the pieces, including the head and the fat, on the burnt wood that is on the altar. He is to wash the inner parts and the legs with water, and the priest is to burn all of it on the altar. It is a burnt offering, an offering made by fire, an aroma pleasing to the Lord. If the offering is a burnt offering from the flock, from either the sheep or the goats, he is to offer a male without defect. He is to slaughter it at the north side of the altar before the Lord, and Aaron's sons, the priest, shall sprinkle its blood against the altar on all sides. He is to cut it into pieces, and the priest shall arrange them, including the head and the fat, on the burning wood that is on the altar. He is to wash the inner parts and the legs with water, and the priest is to bring all of it and burn it on the altar. It is a burnt offering, an offering made by fire, an aroma pleasing to the Lord. If the offering to the Lord is a burnt offering of birds, he is to offer a dove or a young pigeon. The priest shall bring it to the altar, wring off the head, and burn it on the altar. Its blood shall be drained out on the side of the altar. He is to remove the crop with its contents and throw it to the east side of the altar, where the ashes are. He shall tear it open by the wings, not severing it completely, and then the priest shall burn it on the wood that is on the fire on the altar. It is a burnt offering, an offering made by fire, an aroma pleasing to the Lord. And our last reading comes from Psalm 44. We have heard with our ears, O God. Our Father has told us what you did in days long ago. With your hands you drove out the nations and planted our fathers. You crushed the peoples and made our fathers flourish. It was not by their sword that they won the land, nor did their arm bring them victory. It was your right hand, your arm, and the light of your face, for you loved them. You are my King and my God, who decrees victories for Jacob. Through you we push back our enemies. Through your name we trample our foes. I do not trust in my bow. My sword does not bring me victory. But you give us victory over enemies. You put our adversaries to shame. In God we make our boasts all day long, and we will praise your name forever. But now you have rejected and humbled us. You no longer go out with our armies. You made us retreat before the enemy, and our adversaries have plundered us. You gave us up to be devoured like sheep, and have scattered us among the nations. You sold your people for a pittance, gaining nothing from their sale. You have made us a reproach to our neighbors, the scorn and derision of those around us. You made us a byword among the nations. The people shake their heads at us. My disgrace is before me all day long, and my face is covered with shame. At the taunts of those who reproach and revile me, because of the enemy who is bent on revenge. All this happened to us, though we have not forgotten you or been false to your covenant. Our hearts have not turned back, our feet have not strayed from your path, but you crush us and make us a haunt for jackals, and covered us over with deep darkness. If we have forgotten the name of our God, or spread out our hands to a foreign God, would not God have discovered it, since he knows the secrets of the heart? Yet for your sake we face death all day long. We are considered as sheep to be slaughtered. Awake, O Lord, why do you sleep? Rouse yourself. Do not reject us forever. Why do you hide your face and forget our misery and oppression? We are brought down to the dust. Our bodies cling to the ground. Rise up and help us. Redeem us because of your unfailing love. Here ends the reading. One of the reasons I love the Psalms is because they're real. It's people with real problems that are very frank with God. They speak very, very, like he says here, if we would have done worshiping foreign gods, wouldn't you have discovered it? God, you're not around. You're not there for us. Please come. We need you. And then it says a lot of beautiful things. He talks about God. And he says, we're not the ones who fight and win. You have always fought for us with your right hand. You've always pushed back our enemies. In God we boast all our days, and we praise your name forever. It's beautiful words from Korah. Then we see this first book of Leviticus. We see Moses coming to the tent of meeting. Remember, before they have the tabernacle, Solomon's temple that he makes, they met as they went through the desert in a tent, and it was called the tent of meeting. And this is where God gives Moses the tenets on what he should do when it comes to the offerings before God, the rules. And he continues to repeat the same two sentences over and over again, which I think are important ones. He says, "It is a burnt offering, an offering made by fire, an aroma pleasing to the Lord." It's important that we offer what we have to God for what we, not just in the sacrificial system, but even now when we now don't have the sacrificial system anymore, for reasons I'll explain later as we go, but that those offerings, as we give of ourselves and what we have, our first fruits to God, it is a pleasing aroma to the Lord, an aroma made by fire. Later, it becomes the fire of the Holy Spirit. And lastly, we look at this new book of Exodus. We look at the Israelites, the death of Israel and Jacob and Joseph and the descendants, and how when they become no more, the people are put into slavery. But what about the faithfulness of these midwives? What a beautiful testimony to these midwives. As Martin Luther says, if you're going to sin, you got to sin boldly. And this is a time when they sin boldly. And God reveres them here. Because it says they lied and they said, Hebrew women are so vigorous they give birth before the midwives arrive. Which we don't know whether that's the truth or not. It's probably a lie. But they did this to save God's people. And so God exalts them. And he says he even gave them numerous numbers of their own because they feared the Lord. It's so beautiful. And it just shows you the importance of life. Life is so important. And then we hear about the birth of Moses and him getting taken in by Pharaoh's daughter and his mom nursing him. And then how when he gets older, he sees the injustice that's happening. And in response, he kills an Egyptian. And then because of this, which isn't good, Pharaoh tries to kill him. And then he flees to the land of the Midianites and he meets Reuel. And Reuel gives him as agreement to stay. He gives him in marriage to his wife Zipporah. And this part is one that people many times oversee. But he has a child. They have this child called Gershom, and he's named because I have become an alien in a foreign land. He calls him Gershom. Anyways, this is an interesting beginning to the life of Moses. And we see, but God's hand is with him at this point in time. It says, so God looked on the Israelites and was concerned about them. God always looks on us with concern, us who follow in his ways, and he always leads us, as the psalmist says, by his mighty right hand. May you ever remember that God is at your side. He's your mighty right hand, leading you through the deserts of life. May God's blessing be with you this day. I ask that you might pray for me as I pray for you as we explore through this Bible in this new period of Egypt and Exodus. Have a blessed day. May you be a blessing. Amen.